when they go back to the therapist. So you want to make sure that they're going back either 10 visits or at their authorized visit if they need to be on. Does that make sense to everybody? And then their last visit that's scheduled too. So those 2 dates should be on there. So when they go back for a progress note and then their last visit. So then you can keep up, like, so say it's 3-4 and you know all these people need to be scheduled or where they're at, because you should be scheduling them out in advance. You should never have 5 people that you need to schedule today because it's their last visit. You should know that ahead of time. And that's how your schedule fills up as well, as opposed to, like, sometimes poor Ryan, I told him already, I already informed him he's probably gonna get beat up today a little bit because I only know our schedule. So, you know, like last week we had 94 people scheduled because there was a few that we were full, but then we had to work on getting people in. So if you don't schedule them in advance far enough, then you can have a boatload of people that you have to double, and that doesn't make for good care. Okay? And that's why I wrote, never take anything for granted. Just make sure you ask questions. If you're not sure, ask. So, and also when you're looking at your schedule, you should also make sure that all your tractions are in the proper slot. And then now we have hydro and ultra G as well. So we need to make sure anybody who's scheduled for those is blocked out, whether you're seeing them before or after, but just make sure they're in the time appropriate spots. I know before it used to say next are 30 to 45 minutes. Don't pay attention to that. It's really whatever your therapist, how much time your therapist wants you to block off for that. And then the last thing, which is hard, every therapist is different, so double check with them, but like for me, I like my aides to run my schedule. They're pretty much, he's just telling me to go here, 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 here. So you're responsible for the schedule, but you also need to make sure it's gonna flow well. And by flowing well, it just means can't have like 4 people that are hands-on. So this is a deep friction, this is a hands-on, this is this. So you want to try and mix those people into your schedule. And as you know your patients, then you'll know who can be back-to-back. It's going to happen at sometimes where you have 2 people waiting for you at the same time, but really, since you guys are the ones that are scheduling your patients out, make sure the flow goes well. So that kind of leads into the checkoff list. And so your list should be, I know we're kind of short-staffed with aides right now. We don't have a full lineup, but like, so whoever the vacation aide is, which we don't really have one right now. David's being used. Obviously, Piper might be used on Friday. But if you keep your list there, so if there's new patients, so wherever your list is, they can add to the days that you're not here, or if you're sick, somebody can, you know, fill that out for you, so then you don't have to play catch up then again for when you're not here. So does everybody know how to look into the lost patient log? Does everybody know how to do lost patient log? So, and you're checking that lost patient log daily because it changes daily. So you're checking it out 7 days. You don't have to go more than 7 days, but that's a week. So if there's somebody on there, you're looking into why they are. For people who are PTs, you need to ask the PTAs because it's all gonna just be under the PT's name. PTAs, if you have a PTA, you have to check all of them, unfortunately, and then go through and know who your patients are. But if you're keeping your patient log, you should know about all of them anyway. You'll be like, yep, I know that one we're waiting for authorization, or this one's in Florida because they're going to be gone for 2 weeks and then come back. So basically, at any point in time, your therapist should be able to ask you about a patient that's on the schedule, and you may not know right away, like if they're waiting for auth, but you're like, okay, let me get my sheet so I can tell you what's going on with them. If you're on a PT schedule and you're scheduling your Medicare patient out, on that 10th visit, they're back with the therapist, just put progress note and whoever you're going with, progress or DC for whoever you're passing them to. So that first one will be with whoever you're obviously with, but then technically, if you know that you have that coming up, you should, so Ryan could ask me, hey Pam, you have 3 people that are coming up that are going to be on, this one's going to be on Fran's, this one's going to be on Drake's. Are they progress notes or DC? So then he can go back and change them, so then that helps the therapist know whether it's a true progress note or a discharge note, so then they can get changed. Patient name goes here, and so I know some of you like to write all of your new patients down. don't write the new patients until you see them, because if they're not in, they could be a cancel. So if they cancel on ours, it doesn't count, it's not a new patient. So put the patient's name, what their injury is, whether they're Medicare or not, just because the therapist and PTA have to keep track of how many Medicare there are. It kind of really changes what we bill and sort amount. If you're a PT schedule, you're going to say whether you kept them or who you passed them to, not just say pass. You're going to say whoever initials there are. For PTAs, when you have the new patient, you're going to put who they're from. So the not new patient, that we don't even use. And then, but I always also put, like, if you know whether they need authorization or not. Sometimes I'll write that, or if they're VA, because VA only has a certain amount of visits as well, just so you can kind of keep track that might, when I add that to my patient list, I have to check into their authorization. But then on the back part, when you do cancels, I try to kind of make this a little bit clearer. So obviously the patient name, then the date is the date that the cancel is on. So like, say if somebody calls in and they're canceling for tomorrow, you're not writing today's date on here, you're gonna write tomorrow's date on here. Then you're gonna put in the reason why are they canceling, or if they no-showed. And then this next one is if at that time you're talking to them, if they're rescheduled, you're gonna put that rescheduled date in that first one. If you don't get a hold of them and there's no rescheduled date, you call them back later or whatever, that goes in the second rescheduled date that I scribbled out that I said we don't use. But we do use that. I was just like, oh, I realized that we do use that. So, and if they no-showed for that rescheduled date, that goes here. So if they no-show the first time, you just put the no-show, cancel, reschedule in that very first column here. And then the 1, 2, 3 are how many times you call them. So like if the front office said they canceled and you don't know about it, you know, they didn't send it back to us, then you try calling them and trying to get them to reschedule. So I just put a check mark. You don't have to write the time or date. You just check once. You call them 3 times basically, if you don't, unless you get a hold of them. So you're giving them 3 opportunities to come in. If you do get a hold of them during that time, that rescheduled date goes in all that scribbly line. And then if they came in, you either, so for here I would put either if they canceled, so to cancel, I know they're not coming in here, or if they rescheduled, then I put a check mark that they rescheduled. Like DC card, so the cards are anytime you write a discharge card, or if you write a thank you card. So like if a patient gives you a gift or something, if you write a thank you card to them, that counts as a card. The patient calls, anytime you're talking to a patient, even if they call you, mark it down as a patient call. Office calls is if, you know, you're calling the doctor's office to get an MRI report. That depends on each. I know I like to have my aides call for the MRI report or op report. You're just calling, checking it off if you call the office. Doctor's calls, honestly, you guys should probably never ever talk to a doctor, so you shouldn't ever have a doctor call. And the doctor calls are if you actually speak with the doctor. So not just calling the doctor's office. So the doctor's office is an office call, not a doctor call. Well, even if I'm talking to the nurse or something, it's still an office call, not a doctor. If I actually speak with the surgeon, that's when I put that down. Eval calls, those calls that if you're working with a PT, you have to call the next day to make sure they have any questions, that's an eval call. Success stories, when person's last day and you give them that yellow sheet of paper that they're filling out, that's a success story. So that gets, and these are all promos, so your therapist has to have so many promos throughout. That's why it's important to keep track of these. 90-day callbacks, so some therapists will have you do the 90-day callbacks, some therapists will not have you do the 90-day callbacks. I feel like the therapist should make them, because if they have questions, that should be a therapist call. But your therapist might not think that. They're like, nope, just call them if they have any questions, write me a note. You're just pretty much calling them to see if they have any issues since it's been 3 months since they've been in. And if they do, and a lot of times they don't call, you just leave a message, but it still marks as a call if you leave a message. If you don't get a hold of them, that doesn't count as a call. So you have to either leave a message or actually speak with them for it to count as a call. And then if somebody got discharged that day, whether it's on my schedule or even like, so say I have a Medicare that's going to somebody else, I still count that as my discharge because I'm giving it to them, so.
So like Frank discharges home, that's your discharge is not.
So he might take it as a discharge because he has to do the discharge note, so there might be doubles there, but it's still somebody that's going through the discharge, so. And then you're keeping track of the discharge people over on the side too, who you discharge. Any questions on why you're keeping these? So if you guys are like, I don't understand why we have to keep all this stuff, because it's an awful lot of paperwork. Which, trust me, it is an awful lot of paperwork. But if you do it daily, it doesn't, or when it happens, it doesn't take you that long. It's just a matter of getting used to it. So, and then I also gave you all a blank sheet in case you weren't doing it. I don't know if you guys were, so there's a blank sheet in here. This next one is the discharge tracking form. So you have an extra sheet in there if you're not keeping track of your discharge patients. So anytime you have a patient that's discharged, this is where if it's not your patient, you're just doing a discharge, the therapist is doing the discharge for him, you don't have to keep track of that. That goes back to the PTA. The PTAs have to keep track of their own. But you're just putting the patient's name down, their injury, their phone number. The notes for me, since I do my 90-day callbacks, I keep track of it myself, but again, you might have to keep track of it for your therapist. You're gonna ask them, I just put little notes to help me remember 3 months later who the heck the person is, because I won't remember who they are, even though I think I will, I don't. So that goes here, and then right away you should be doing the thank you card. Every therapist system does different for thank you cards. I don't mind doing the actual envelope, but then I want my aide to do the actual note because I will call them in 90 days. But some therapists are like, no, you write the note because I'm gonna call them, so I don't really care. Or vice versa, whatever. I think Norina does her own thank you notes. Fran, I think, will write his own.
Fran has this where I write something and then I put it in his thing.
To finish up, yep. So which is great. So and the patients, even though they're like, oh my gosh, but patients love them. They'll, after you've been here for a while, they'll be like, oh, thank you for the thank you note. This was awesome. So then I just do a little check to know that I've sent that on the side. When it's your 6-month anniversary, then that means
hey, I'm going on
bonus.
6.
So when it is your 6th, make sure, because you need to know what your numbers are. So the therapist will have numbers that they need, and so you'll need to know what the therapist's average charge has to be, even though you are not there's no way you guys can change what the therapist bills, but you can be like, our average charge has been really crappy. What do I need to do to increase that? So one of the things is making sure the Medicare aren't back to back to back to back, because when they're back to back, you can't bill all the charges for Medicare. So that would be the only way that you can help your PTA boost their charges up. The percent of arrivals, it's usually 92, and if you've been here longer than I think 3 years, it's 93%. So it's going to either be 92 or 93%. The number of patients, that varies from therapists, so you just need to see what their number is. And so your goal is to try and make sure that number of patients are scheduled out every week that actually come in. So you're also, not only are you keeping track of your patients, but you're also, when it gets Wednesday, you're like, okay, we've had too many cancels, so we need to get either more patients in, or I gotta get some of these cancels to be rescheduled. Kind of working on things that way to try and get those numbers up. And then
If you're with the PT, does the evals count as a patient?
evals will count as a patient visit. So that's what I was just gonna say. So new patients, each therapist has to have so many new patients. So just make sure you're creating room for them, and so that's where it helps to pass, so then you can create new patient evals. And that, hopefully you can go up to anybody and be like, hey, can I work this patient in? Or, I think, unless I have too many, I'll usually get them in. But if I'm in the 90s, I'll be like, there's really not a whole lot I can do. That's too many patients for me. But I'll try and get them in. But also, along with that, that's what I wrote on the back. So I don't know if this has been brought up, but so each team, for your monthly bonus, you're supposed to have Google reviews as well. So you have to have 2 for the month. for each, yeah, so between you and your team. So when I met with Fran the first time, so your team would be you and Drake. You have to have one each, so that would be 2 together. So like you have to have a Google, so when you were with me, that's why I always try to make sure I had 2. You have to have at least 1 Google review, 1 for me and 1 for you to get your monthly bonus. So your goal should just be 2. You're trying to get 2 for the month.
So it'd be like Mary and I and Fran and I.
So I don't know how yours is going to work. So you should only have to have 1 for yourself for the whole time. But then Mary, that's what's hard, because if technically they're like whoever gets the Google review, but I would think that, as you're getting ready, mostly you guys will be the ones that are asking for the Google reviews. So I just really try and make sure that try and get 2 people at least to do a Google review. I know it hasn't always happened, and so far they haven't taken our bonus away, but bonuses are based on getting a Google review. So if there's no Google review, you may not get your bonus for that month. So it's kind of important. That's why they're pushing those. And then 90-day calls, the only reason why I wrote that on there, because you have to do your 90-day calls in order to get bonused as well. Doesn't necessarily mean you guys, it's your team. So their 90-day calls are part of bonuses. Lost patient log, which is what you're checking daily. And it has to be under 1% certain. I think it can't be any more than 10% of your number of patients. So if you have 100 people and you have 10 people on, you're like, it's a high number. So, but that's why you want to make sure you don't have very many people on your lost patient log. And lost patient log are truly no appointments scheduled. They're not the ones that have appointments scheduled. It's just the NAS ones. And then you have to attend, I think, 10 out of the 12 staff meetings, and however, you have a percentage of these in-services. So we've already got February, we didn't do a January, we did a February in-service, and we did a March in-service. So just when you're doing these, whatever month it is, so if you've done them, you can just write the date of the in-service, the date of the staff meeting. So flow sheets. I know probably none of you have been taught really how to do flow sheets. I know you're just put the stuff in there and then enter. So what I did yesterday, I went through our flow sheets. I don't normally check flow sheets because that's your business, but we need to start doing better at flow sheets, only because if I have to go to court for a case that's here, I have only what's in our charts. So that's one way of how to look how serious it is. If I had to go in front of the judge, could I tell him what happened off of my flow sheet? The flow sheet has to basically tell a story. So it's kind of important to put the order that you do them in. So if you do stim, how many people do stim first? Rarely. Very few people do stim at the very beginning of the treatment. So that should be the last thing. Usually that is the last thing. So it needs to be in order. So that's why it's kind of, I've been on Ryan a little bit. I try and mark 1, 2, 3, which order is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in order every time. Like, so say you switch the lap holes into rows. It's not going to be that big of a deal, except if something happens to them, then it's that big of a deal. Yeah, Ashley brought up a good thing, and so it's the plan. Like, what if I put plan on? So it just means I want to do it next time. So Francis likes his in actual note form, but you can also put it on the flow sheet and put a 0 there to make sure that it are not done this time. So it's on for the next time, but you have to make sure it clarifies that was not done during that treatment time. So yes, you can put it on the plan. Sometimes when it's in the plan, unless you check, or if it's in a note, if you don't check off that note form, it won't print off next time. So then you're back with square one. I'm like, I have no clue what should, like, it'll get missed again.